The call was supposed to be over. Ryan set his phone face down on the kitchen counter and walked outside to check on our son, and that's when I heard Chloe's voice still coming through the speaker, clear as anything. "Once the judge sees the messages I sent you," she said, "Grace won't look stable enough to keep the house, let alone Ethan." I stood there with a dish towel in my hand, not breathing, listening to my husband's mistress plan how to take my son and my father's house in the same sentence. Ryan came back inside a minute later, picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, got pulled away." Where were we? Like nothing in the world had just happened. He had no idea I'd heard every word, and he had no idea what that would end up costing him. Welcome to Revenge Stories Narrated, where family betrayal meets inevitable justice, and karma always collects its debt. My name is Grace Foster. I'm 33. Ryan and I had been married for 6 years, with a 4-year-old son named Ethan, and we lived in the house my father, Walter, left me 2 years ago when he passed. Ryan worked as a physical therapist at a clinic across town, the kind of job that made everyone in his life describe him as caring, patient, someone who helped people heal for a living. I stayed home with Ethan after a difficult pregnancy, left me with an anxiety disorder I'd been managing carefully with a therapist, and for a while, medication I'd since stopped needing. For most of our marriage, I thought we were simply an ordinary young family, tired in the ordinary ways, stretched thin in the ordinary ways. I didn't know, until that afternoon in the kitchen, that Ryan had been seeing Chloe Martins, the receptionist at his clinic, for nearly a year. I also didn't know he'd been building a file on me the entire time, one text message and one bad week at a time. It started small enough that I never noticed the pattern. 6 months earlier, after a rough night where I couldn't sleep and Ryan found me crying in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, he said, "Maybe you should write this down, in case your doctor needs it." I thought he meant to help me. I didn't know he meant to help himself. 3 months after that, during an argument about money, I raised my voice, more than I'm proud of, and later that same night he sent his mother a text I never saw at the time. "Grace had another episode tonight. Getting worried about Ethan." I found that message myself, much later, saved in a folder on his laptop labeled simply, G. The folder had 11 documents in it by the time I found it. Screenshots of arguments, dated and organized like evidence in a case file. A photo of me asleep on the couch at 4 in the afternoon during a flu that kept me down for a week, captioned only with a date. A voice memo of me crying that I never knew he'd recorded, from a night I remembered as private, just the two of us, him holding me while I cried about missing my father. "I need some space today," I told him once, during a hard week that spring, needing exactly the kind of quiet anyone needs sometimes. He wrote that down too, next to a screenshot of a text where I'd asked him, half joking, "Am I losing my mind?" during a stressful week with Ethan's daycare closed for repairs. I lost something with every one of these moments, even though I couldn't see the pattern yet. I lost trust in my own memory, since I started wondering if I really was as unstable as the tired, anxious version of myself Ryan reflected back at me some nights. I lost 8 pounds that spring without trying, since I stopped being hungry most days. I stopped calling my sister as often, because Ryan had started saying things like, "Maybe don't tell her about the bad nights, she'll just worry." And somewhere in there I'd gone quiet in a house that used to be full of my own voice. I stopped going to my book club too, a small thing but it had been mine, until eventually I stopped being asked at all because I stopped going. I didn't know any of this was building towards something until the afternoon his phone stayed live on the counter. If you've ever had someone quietly turn your hardest moments into evidence against you, tell me in the comments, because I want to know I'm not the only one who lived through that. I didn't say anything to Ryan that night. I made dinner, put Ethan to bed, and lay awake next to my husband thinking about Chloe's voice saying, "Won't look stable enough to keep the house," and I understood, clearly for the first time, that I hadn't been imagining the last 6 months. I'd been documented. The next morning, once Ryan left for work, I called my father's old lawyer, a woman named Diane Cross who'd handled his estate and knew exactly how the house was titled. "The house is yours, Grace," Diane told me over the phone. "Solely yours, under your father's will. Ryan has no legal claim to it regardless of any custody outcome. That part, at least, he's wrong about." "He doesn't think he's wrong," I said. He's been building a file on me for months. Recordings, texts, photos. Diane went quiet for a second. Then we need to build our own file. Starting now. Write down everything you remember, as close to the actual dates as you can. And Grace, don't confront him yet. Let me see what we're working with first. I began writing down everything I remembered that week, filling nearly 9 pages by hand, and I started keeping my own phone recording app ready, the same way Ryan apparently had his. It was 9 days later, sitting in the parked car outside Ethan's preschool, that I heard something I wasn't looking for. Ryan had left his laptop signed into a shared cloud folder we still had from years earlier, and a new file synced onto my own phone overnight. A drafted letter to his own lawyer, outlining documented instability and a proposed custody arrangement giving him primary care of Ethan and, separately, a request that I be required to vacate the house within 90 days, given the strain the property places on Grace's mental health. He wanted my own father's house taken away from me, using my own hardest nights as the reason. I didn't confront him that week either. I let Diane finish preparing instead, and I kept every recording, every date, every message quietly organized in a file of my own, one Ryan had no idea existed. Some nights I sat across from him at dinner, listening to him talk about his day at the clinic, and I genuinely couldn't tell if the calm I felt was strength or something closer to shock. 6 weeks later, Ryan sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd learned the truth in the first place, and told me he thought, for Ethan's sake, we should discuss custody arrangements calmly. I've been documenting some concerns, he said, sliding a folder across the table like a doctor delivering bad news. I think we both know this house has been hard on you since your dad passed. I know exactly what you've documented, I said, and set my own folder down next to his. I have some documentation of my own. I played him 3 seconds of the recording from that afternoon in the kitchen. Chloe's voice, clear as anything, talking about the house and Ethan in the same breath. Ryan's face went pale in a way I'd never seen on him before, not once in 6 years of marriage. Grace, I can explain that, he said. You don't need to explain it to me, I said. You need to explain it to a judge. The rest happened faster than I expected. Diane submitted our file to the court, including the recording, the messages between Ryan and Chloe discussing custody strategy months before either of them had raised the subject with me directly, and records showing Chloe was a subordinate employee at Ryan's own clinic, which put his job at serious risk the moment human resources became involved. The custody hearing wasn't close. The judge ruled that a parent actively coaching a workplace affair partner on how to use a spouse's mental health history against her in a custody proceeding was, in itself, a serious concern about judgment. I was granted primary custody of Ethan. Ryan kept regular visitation, supervised for the first 3 months. Ryan's clinic opened its own internal investigation once the relationship with Chloe came to light through the court filings, since it violated a clear policy about supervisors and direct reports. He was let go 2 months later, quietly, without the send-off a 6-year employee might expect. Chloe resigned before they could finish reviewing her file as well. The same folder Ryan built to make me look unfit ended up being the exact evidence that made him look unfit instead, in front of the one audience that actually mattered. I kept the house. I kept Ethan home in it, in the room my father once used as a study, now painted a soft yellow for a toy corner Ethan picked out himself. I started therapy again, not because anyone forced me to this time, but because I wanted to be steady for my son on my own terms. My sister and I talk every week again now, the way we used to before I went quiet. Ryan moved into an apartment near the clinic he no longer works at. I hear from a mutual friend that he's looking for work at a new practice 2 towns over, one that hasn't heard the story yet. I imagine that won't last long in a town this size, where word travels faster than any file he ever built. The call that was supposed to be over that afternoon in my kitchen turned out to be the one thing that actually ended things clearly, for both of us. Ryan forgot to hang up the phone. I've never once forgotten what I heard, and some nights, when the house is quiet and Ethan is finally asleep, I still think about how close I came to believing the version of myself he tried so hard to write down. If you've ever had to quietly gather your own proof instead of shouting the truth right away, you already know it works better that way. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, and tell me down below what you would have done standing in that kitchen.